Welcome to K-Drama Recaps, your one-stop shop for all things K-Drama. If you're new around here, just a heads up. Spoilers ahead. With that out of the way, Episode 3 opens by jumping back and forth between the young Sunja and Granny Sunja timelines. There's a beautiful juxtaposition going on between the two timelines. Both Sunjas are cutting the kimchi and preparing meals for the people around them, but the bigger juxtaposition is between life and death, as Granny Sunja realizes that her sister-in-law has finally passed away, while young Sunja realizes that she is with child. Granny Sunja observes the final cremation of her sister-in-law. Through the fire, we are taken back to the young Sunja timeline. The affair is in full swing as we see several scenes of Kwon-soo and Sunja in the throes of lust. But something is amiss, as we are told that Kwon-soo has been missing for longer than usual, worrying Sunja, who is also dealing with a nasty bout of morning sickness. Back in the Granny Sunja timeline, Sunja is trying to figure out where to put Kyunghee's urn. Solomon suggests on top of the piano where she can be close to the pictures of her memories, but Sunja disagrees. The young pastor of the church visiting from Korea comes to their house to pray with them, and much to Solomon's annoyance recommends the piano, to which Sunja heartily agrees. Young Sunja is doing her daily round at the fish market and there's a storm coming. As she's finishing up her last stop, she looks up and sees Kwon-soo, which she hasn't seen in a while. She smiles a rare smile. Their reunion quickly turns red hot and they can't keep their hands off of each other. After their session, Ko gives her a gift to atone for his long time away from her, a gold pocket watch. In return, she gives him a surprise as well and tells him that she is with child. They are both excited, but their excitement quickly turns in the opposite direction when Sunja brings up marriage. Ko assumed Sunja knew that this was just an affair, while Sunja was expecting to become Mrs. Kohansu. Ko has a family in Japan, so he cannot make her his wife. Sunja is crushed. When he offers to give her and the child a comfortable life, Sunja is clearly disappointed in the direction things are headed. Ko starts to gaslight her as if she were trying to honeypot him, and she runs away, disgusted at him. In the next scene, a handsome young man is getting off the ferry boat, and he is clearly ill. He is looking to stay at Sunja's boarding house, and on the way there, he coincidentally bumps into Kwon-soo in the process, which is a bit of foreshadowing to future events yet to happen in later episodes. When Sunja arrives, the sick man arrives at the same time and stumbles unconscious on the floor of the boarding house. Back to the Granny Sunja timeline. Solomon is helping her clean out the room Kyunghee was using before she died. Sunja and Solomon wax philosophical about how a house is just a roof, walls, and cement. Sunja asks her grandson what is going on with that deal he was working on. He explains that the deal is dead in the water because the landowner will not sell, and then Solomon has a brilliant idea. He asks his grandmother to go to the landowner herself and mention all the things they just talked about, how a house in the end is just a roof, walls, and cement, and will not bring back the dead. In the young Sunja timeline, everyone in the boarding house is curious as to the fate of the young man on death's door. In the other room, Youngjin and the local pharmacist look through the young man's belongings to find a name. They find a letter that he has written to his mother and father about traveling to Osaka to work in a church and join his older brother Yosef and his wife Kyunghee. The young man's name is Isak, and he has tuberculosis. Youngjin hopes that Isak will make it through the night. Solomon brings his grandmother to the Korean landowner's home in hopes that Sunja can do a better job of convincing the landlady to sell her property. His plan seems to work because they are invited in for a meal, and while they eat, the two older women share stories of the past. Of the education that was kept from them as children, to the white rice they were not allowed to eat due to the Japanese occupation. The two women connect at a level that Solomon just cannot understand. One of the things the Korean landowner encourages Sunja to do is to go visit her homeland again before it's too late. We don't know it yet, but Sunja takes it to heart and visits Korea in a future episode. By the end of their conversation, the Korean landowner calls Solomon shameless for going to these lengths to try to get her to sell her property, and he tells her that times have changed. It is now time for the Japanese to repay her for all the heartache they caused her and her family. This makes the Korean landowner think. In the young Sunja timeline, Youngjin checks on Isak the next morning and is pleased to find his fever has subsided. She tells Sunja to go prepare some juk for Isak to eat, but Sunja has some important news to tell her. The important news is that she is pregnant, but moreover, pregnant out of wedlock. Her mother is devastated and wants to know the identity of the man who did this to her daughter, but Sunja is unwilling to give him up. In the culture of those times, that child would become a bastard and an outcast in their society, and their future becomes grim. In the next room, Isak is awake, alert, and eavesdropping on the entire conversation. In the next scene, Granny Sunja and Solomon are walking to the train station, and she explains to him that the Korean landlady wants to die in that house. Solomon can't wrap his head around why that is, no matter how much Sunja tries to explain it to him. The generation gap between them looms large, but his grandmother tells him that she raised him well to be a good person, and she trusts he will do the right thing. Back at the boarding house, the women are having dinner, but the tension is clearly sky high. Both Youngjin and Sunja are clearly sad and worried about the future, but are not able to tell Tongi and Boki. Youngjin still loves her daughter and places a piece of fish in Sunja's bowl and tells her to eat, as all loving Korean parents do. A dejected Solomon is walking back to his office. When Tom calls out to him, for a second it seems like Solomon has to tell him the bad news. But to his surprise, Tom tells him the landlady's lawyers called and that Solomon's plan worked. Tom busts out his terrible Japanese again. Before they can go out to celebrate, Solomon gets another call from Hana. Solomon learns that Hana is very sick. Isak is now awake and recovering nicely. He thanks Yangjin for nursing him back to health and tells her he needs to head into town to send a wire to let his parents know that he is healthy. Yangjin tells him to take Sunja with him in case he needs help. He does not say no. As he walks with Sunja, he tells her he wants to buy her lunch, to thank her and her mom for taking care of him while he was ill. She recommends an udon restaurant that she heard was good, and as they head there, she locks eyes with Kohansu, who sees her with Isak. Is that jealousy on Kohansu's face? Solomon is still trying to get Hana to talk to him, when Tom takes the phone away and tells Hana that Solomon will call her back because he needs to celebrate. Solomon, though, can't celebrate. His mind is preoccupied with concern over Hana's health. Granny Sunja goes to see her son Mozasu at his pachinko parlor. He's surprised to see her, but Sunja just couldn't wait. She can't bury Kyunghee in Japan. She wants to take her back to Korea to lay her to rest. In the restaurant, Isak and young Sunja are making small talk. It's her first time in a restaurant, and she admires Isak's ability to speak Japanese and his education. He remains modest and tells her he feels stupid most of the time despite all his learning. As they begin to eat, he reveals that he knows she is with child, and asks her if she would consider giving up the child for adoption. She responds by letting him know she is fully aware of the repercussions of her actions. Her and her bastard child will be outcasts. Sunja herself will have to leave her mother soon before she brings shame upon her family and the boarding house to ruin. But she also knows that she grew up the daughter of an outcast, who loved and raised her against all odds. Sunja makes an impassioned speech about how even if it means she sacrifices her health and comfort, she will love and raise her child so that he would never want for anything. She will not give up her child. Isak is speechless at the depth of her strength and conviction. He apologizes to her for underestimating her situation because he's about to drop the mother of all proposals on Sunja. He asks her if she would be able to forget the father of her child and in time, learn to love another. Could she learn to love Isak instead? If you enjoyed this episode of K-Drama Recaps, press that like button and subscribe to our channel as this helps our content get out to more eyeballs. Is there a Korean drama that you'd like us to recap? Let us know in the comments below and hopefully we can cover that drama in future videos. See you in the next episode.